Hello everyone, welcome back to Steam Code. In this video we're going to be creating a circle splitter. So basically what a circle splitter is you start with this one circle, then once you hover your mouse over that circle, let's split into 4 equally sized circles. You do the same with any of the other ones, and as you can see they all split into equally sized circles, and this can be done until the circles are very small. And as you can see, that's how the application works. So it's just a cool little project. It helps teach you JQuery and D3 within this tutorial series. So those are the 2 libraries that we're going to be using. So let's hop right into this. So first, inside of our index.html file, remember all 3 of these files are within the same directory. So once you're setting up your project, just make sure they're all within the same directory. So within our index.html file, we're going to start off with doc type HTML as usual. Then within our head, we'll set the title to circle splitter tutorial. Then we're going to need to reference JQuery and D3.js, because those are the libraries that we're going to be using. So we're going to need their CDNs. So I've already copied their CDNs. You can find these in the description, or you can find them online. Just search for D3 CDN or jQuery CDN. You'll be able to find them really easily. Then next we're going to need to reference our app.js file. So script source equals app.js. Then next we're just going to need to reference our main.css file. So link rel equals style sheet, and href is equal to main.css. Okay, perfect. So next within our body, we're just going to be creating one div and an SVG. So for the div, the ID will be set to container. This just contains everything that we have within our project. And then the SVG works kind of like a canvas in that you're able to draw shapes onto the screen, kind of as you see here with the circles, and you're also able to interact with them. We're going to allow you to interact with them within our JavaScript file. Okay, so that's all we need for our index.html file. So now let's move into main.css. So for the CSS, it's also going to be pretty brief. So first we're going to start off with container. The style for the container will be display set to flex. We're going to justify the content to the center. We're going to align the items to the center. And the height will be 100 vEdge. You can set this to whatever you feel comfortable with. This is just what I thought looked well or looked nice. And then for the SVG, width will be set to 512 pixels, and the height will also be set to 512 pixels. Alright, so that's all we need for our main.css and index.html. So now let's move into the real meat of the code with our app.js file. So the first thing we're going to need with our app.js is this jQuery statement, document.ready function. So what this is stating is once the document or once the page has fully loaded, so all of the assets, all of the scripts, everything that relates to the page has fully been loaded, then do whatever inside this function. So if all of that has not yet happened, then whatever's inside of here will not run yet. So the first thing we're going to need is a variable. We're going to call that count. And this we're going to set to 0, and this represents the ID of each circle that we're going to create. So each time a circle is split, a new circle or 4 new circles are created, and each of them will have a new ID. So we'll increment count each time a circle is split. Then var data. This just represents the data that belongs to each circle. And we're going to create a map to represent this. So for the x, this will be the x coordinate of that data. That will be 256, or the x coordinate of that circle, that's 256 for the first circle. For the second circle, the y variable for the first circle will also be 256. The radius of that circle will be 256 as well. And the ID of this circle will be count. So that's all we need for our data variable. Then underneath here, we're going to increment count because the next circle we're going to create needs to have a new ID. It can't have the same ID as the first circle. Then next we're going to be using some D3, so we're going to say D3.select SVG dot append circle. So what we're doing here with this statement is we are selecting the SVG element we created inside of index.html and adding a new circle to that. That circle does not have any attributes yet, so we're going to add that with the apply attributes function. And we're going to create that function in just a few minutes. Then next, we're going to say var circles equals d3.select all circle. This will make sense in the later videos, because what this does is selects all the circles that are on the board, but right now there's only one circle. But once we have multiple circles, as you see here, that will be of more importance. Then we're going to bind this data, so circle.circles.data. So what we're doing is we're binding these data variables, or these data values, so the x property, the y property, radius, and ID are now all being bound to each of these circles. And now we're going to attach the attributes to the circle. So we can say circles dot attribute cx, and the cx just represents the center, the x coordinate of the center of the circle. So cx will be function d and then return d.x. The d parameter is just the data that we just bound to it, that we just bound to this circle. So d.x would just be 256 because x represents the 256 value. Then we can say dot attribute cy function d, and then we can return d.y. Then the attribute for the y and the attribute for the radius and the identification, we can also just copy and paste those and change the values for those. And then now we're going to create the apply attributes function. So for the apply attributes function, say function apply attr's var selection equals d3.select all circles. We're just selecting all the circles that are on the page. Then selection.data we're binding the data that we just created up here to each of the circles, and as we go on, we're going to be creating more. We're going to be adding more values to that data to correspond to each of the circles that are on the board. Selection.data. Then we're going to be doing the same thing we did up here for the first circle. We're just going to add these attributes. But instead of saying circles, we're going to say selection. So for each circle, the attributes for the x center, the y center, the radius, and the ID will all be set. So now if we save this, navigate to our page and reload, as you see, our first circle is now on the board. But as you can also see, it's not splitting once we hover over the circle. And we're going to be fixing that in the future tutorials. This tutorial here was just to get the circle on the board. Next, we're going to be adding handlers. We're going to be maybe adding colors as well if there's enough interest in doing that, seeing how it's done. And you're going to be learning more about how the D3 library and JavaScript libraries work, or JQuery libraries work. So if you enjoyed this tutorial, please like and subscribe. If you have any questions, please please don't hesitate to leave them in the comment section down below. Check out our GitHub. Our GitHub has code for a lot of our videos archived there. Check out our Patreon. It has we have cool content exclusive for patrons on there. And this has been Steam Code. I hope you enjoyed. I will see you next time.